Hi, so I'm finally here with my review of Bad Blood Secrets and Lies in a Silicon Valley Startup by John Carreyrou. So, this is really the story of John Carreyrou, who's a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist, his takedown of Theranos. Theranos was this absolute brilliant story of a startup in Silicon Valley inspired by Apple and the culture at Apple and Steve Jobs, like so many people have been. And it was the story of the founder, Elizabeth Holmes, who was a Stanford dropout, 19, 20-year old dropout who actually started this company. And really, the story is a fascinating story which reads like a thriller. If I didn't know that the facts in this were true, I would have imagined that this was a really fanciful story that some really excellent fiction writer had put together, and I'd be looking forward to his next book. Set in another kind of industry or something like that. It was really brilliantly. It's a story that's so brilliant that you couldn't invent all this stuff up actually. And sometimes that's what they say: truth is stranger than fiction. So it's really about Theranos and Elizabeth Holmes. Elizabeth Holmes was this really intriguing figure because she kind of emulated Steve Jobs, deeply inspired by Apple and Steve Jobs and their philosophy, and clearly emulated it at multiple levels, and the whole cult of personality and how she built it and how it went across media. But what's really fascinating about this is how far Theranos managed to get away with the lies that they were telling, because they claim to have invented, and this, by the way, is public knowledge, so there's no spoilers here in that sense. This book kind of takes you across the story in a very detailed manner. It's based on his own reporting in the Wall Street Journal. And so it's a fairly commendable story. It reads like like I said, like a racy thriller. And I believe it's being made into a Hollywood movie or a series or something like that. I'm not surprised at all. It's really a story brilliantly told. It's like I said, it's like a thriller, and you'll completely enjoy reading it. But also the lessons that you take away from it about, corporate America, corporate governance, just ethics when you're pursuing profit in business, and how some of the biggest names were on the board of this company, and they had some of the biggest partnerships, and for how long they were able to hoodwink people by just kind of following processes that claimed to be secretive because they were protecting their IP, and how they used powerful lawyers and lobbies to threaten people to kind of cover up what they were really doing. So they had claimed to invent this fantastic technology that could run a lot of analytical blood tests on a single drop of blood that could be drawn from the finger rather than be taken from the vein, the venous draw as they call it, which is obviously a little more traumatizing, especially if you're a chronic patient and stuff. Then you have to do a lot of venous draws. It becomes quite traumatic for patients because the veins kind of get difficult to draw blood from. It's painful. And it is traumatic for somebody who needs blood tests on a regular basis and so on. Plus, in any case, I think Elizabeth Holmes claimed that she was, needle phobic, and I'm sure there's some term for that. And I guess a lot of people identify with that kind of feeling, with that phobia. So her technology of just a single prick on the finger, kind of drawing one drop of blood, and being able to run like literally hundreds of tests on that itself, she had claimed to come up with revolutionary technology. But actually what really was the case was there was no such technology that had been invented. It clearly was a case of her kind of aspiring to invent something revolutionary, wanting to do so, and then just kind of faking it until she made it a kind of culture which again has been espoused. I don't quite agree with it. Ultimately authenticity can't be faked, and if you know what you're doing, you don't have to fake anything, right? And so the idea is that she kind of got away with it for a really long time. That's really what's fascinating. It's unbelievable. Like if you read the book and you kind of see how things progressed and how people refuse to believe all the evidence to the contrary. And there are massive names here. There are big names that invested, including, by the way, Rupert Murdoch, who invested over $120 million in this venture. And, you'd think he's like this wily fox that nobody can fool. But he had to wipe off over $100 million in this investment. And so all of these people, all these powerful people in lobbies kind of actually helped Theranos to keep going as a valid story. And this is really a book that's very well written. Obviously, it's a journalist, so he's checked out its sources, and they have to vet everything through their legal department and make sure that Theranos, by the way, used intimidatory tactics in terms of especially litigation very effectively through a lawyer who's like a top-notch lawyer in the US and who actually was on Theranos' board. And so all of that is part of this story. I would recommend it really, really strongly. It tells you how things function, particularly in the capitalist system, particularly in this in the United States of America, which we believe to be extremely fair and democratic. And some things that come to mind are how people can actually suppress information that of even criminal activities or illegal activities based on just non-disclosure agreements and things like that, and get away with it because they have really strong lawyers and intimidate people and so on. So that really doesn't bode well for a democratic society. And you'd think America is extremely democratic, the United States, but turns out it's not that easy. It's not that simple. The answers are never so simple. So the rich and powerful typically get away with everything. And so at one point, I think Elizabeth Holmes comes across as a really weird but very intriguing character that you don't really get to know up close and personal, but you see lots of her behavior and you kind of wonder how it was that she got to this point and managed to convince so many people. Apparently she had magnetic charisma and charm, and she probably believed in her dream, but ultimately ended up lying and probably justified it as a reality distortion field, as they spoke about Steve Jobs in her own head, because Steve Jobs was still working with technology that had to prove itself in everybody's hand, right? But here no such technology existed apparently, and they were simply running some of the tests on commercial machines that were available, and pretending like it was done on their miniature versions that she wanted to put in every doctor's office or every home, literally, and stuff. So that was the vision she had, never delivered. So ultimately that was the whole story, and then the whole thing collapsed. And I remember reading about all this stuff when actually it was being hyped. I remember reading an article in Wired magazine, which is one of my favorite magazines, and how it spoke about this new technology and what her vision was of changing the world and using this single drop of blood to run diagnostic tests and kind of detect diseases in advance and help people overall. But ultimately fake things to such a degree where there were fake tests, not really fake tests, inaccurate tests going out, and misinforming patients about their health condition, which could have led to disastrous consequences. So strongly recommended. I believe everyone should read this book to get an understanding of how the world works. It gives you a unique perspective into how companies work and how the world really works, and how PR blitzes and all that are not something that you should believe, and you should look at the evidence and look at some basic fundamentals, especially in this day and age of social media when there are conspiracy theories and so much stuff going around, and one never knows what to believe, whether it's vaccines being effective, not effective, all of that kind of stuff. It's very important to understand that you have to look at the fundamentals. You have to look at what science does. You have to look at peer reviewed reports, and even there can be scandals. And you have to look very closely at the data and go with the right sources. And thank God for great journalism, because this gentleman, and whistleblowers who have ethics and who see things going wrong in the company. So that's really what the story is about. Incredible story, strongly recommended book, not just for the story that it tells, but also how it tells it. It's really interesting. It's a page turner. And I was literally staying up to finish the book because I wanted to know what happened next. Although this was a story that played out factually, and you kind of know from the news reports what happened. In fact, I think Elizabeth Holmes is currently appearing in court, and there are all kinds of things happening there as well. So we'll see whether she gets finally sentenced, whether she gets a criminal sentence. And of course, the company was shut down. A lot of the investors sued Elizabeth Holmes. And there's an interesting character who makes his appearance here, who's a Pakistani origin, Pakistani origin businessman or entrepreneur who made a few millions, and he turns up and he's basically Elizabeth Holmes' romantic partner as well as second in command at the company. And his story is also very, very interesting, particularly if you're from this part of the world, which is the Asian subcontinent, Indian subcontinent. Then you'll identify with some of his traits and understand some of the work culture that he kind of propagated at Theranos. So all in all, a wonderful story, fantastic story, great characters, great journalism. Can't recommend it enough. Go out and get it, and put your comments in the comments box below. Tell me what you thought of my review, and also I'd love it if you suggested other books for me to review. I'll see you soon with my next review. Don't forget to check back on the channel once in a while. I'll see you soon. Goodbye.